Welcome to Keeping Healthy with Kitchen Herbs. Hi, I'm Catherine Novak. I'm a certified medicinal herbalist who teaches about wildcrafting edible plants, as well as using herbs and essential oils to create better health and balance in our lives. I'm also the owner of Beads N Botanicals, a body, mind, and spirit shop located in Urbana, Illinois, about 2.5 hours south of Chicago. The Keeping Healthy with Kitchen Herbs series focuses on using your kitchen spice rack as a medicinal resource. If you do little cooking, or if your spices are more than a year old, you'll probably need to get a fresh supply if you want to use those herbs and spices for medicinal purposes. Good quality spices make for tastier foods anyway, as well as more effective medicine. Sometimes the simplest of kitchen spices that we may take for granted on other times are among the most useful medicinally. And it's good to know about the resources that we have at hand for those times when maybe we can't run to the grocery store or run to the pharmacy immediately to get something. Work with what you have. Today's edition of Keeping Healthy with Kitchen Herbs is sponsored by the herb rosemary. Rosemary is really a favorite of mine. Of course, I'll probably say that about every single herb we talk about. It's a Mediterranean plant originally. It's a small, fragrant evergreen shrub, and while it did originate in the countries surrounding the Mediterranean Sea, it now grows in North America as well. It usually overwinters well outside in areas of the United States where winter temperatures stay above 18 degrees Fahrenheit. So, for example, when I lived in southeast Illinois, I knew people who grew it outside in a sheltered area next to their house so that in the wintertime it had some protection if the temperatures dropped a little bit. But generally in southeast Virginia, the temperatures did not drop below 18, and people did very, very well with it. Unfortunately, up here in Illinois, that's not likely to be the case. But you can overwinter it in your home, and it's best to do it in an area that doesn't have extremes of heat. And the way I overwintered my prostrate rosemary last year was I made sure to mist it, and I probably watered it maybe once a week or so. But I misted it almost every single day. And the thing is that rosemary plants like a lot of moisture, but or I should say some humidity, but they like to have their roots drain really well. That's pretty typical of a lot of Mediterranean plants. You'll find that for lavender as well. I did overwinter this plant, but this rosemary plant that I have here, I purchased recently at a local grocery store. So this plant came from the Urbana Farmers Market last year, and this one came just literally the other day from a local grocery because I couldn't resist getting another one. If you have a greenhouse, you might also be able to grow it almost year-round, but usually that would be for a greenhouse that's going to give it a certain amount of protection and maybe not heated, but you'd have to figure it out. If you've got that kind of greenhouse, you may have already learned and played with it as it is. Anyway, the leaf is the part of the plant that's used in herbal medicine, and the leaf is actually looks almost kind of like pine needles. It's kind of thinner, but it's not really pointy. If you go like this very gently, you will smell the fragrance of rosemary. It's really kind of calming, and it's very pungent at the same time. It's really nice. When I say pungent, it's not spicy at all. It's just very flavorful. As a culinary spice, rosemary is often used to flavor lamb and chicken and fatty meats. This herb's antioxidant properties are one of the reasons that rosemary is used so extensively in cooking nowadays. In the days before refrigeration, spices, including rosemary, helped to preserve food. This is why they were so valuable and spice trading routes were so well protected and guarded. Because rosemary helps increase blood circulation and strengthens the capillaries, that is the small blood vessels, it can have an uplifting and strengthening effect on the brain. Therefore, the herb has a reputation for being good for poor memory. If you're familiar with some of the attributes to herbs in terms of spiritual purposes, a lot of times rosemary is considered to be an herb that is for remembrance, remembering people. And I would say because of its antioxidant properties in preserving meats, it's also got some of its spiritual purposes in terms of being a protective herb coming from that as well. It protects people from illness because the meats didn't go bad. Okay. Rosemary is also used a lot of times for when someone has a cold or flu and fever. It's considered to be a diaphoretic, and diaphoretics usually will make someone's temperature spike up a little bit, and a person will break into a sweat, and that'll actually break the fever. It also can be used to relieve tension headaches. So it's helpful in that sense. You can also inhale it for bronchial and lung infections or sinus infections. And that could be you make a strong tea of it, and you got to put a towel over your head and let the steam come up and smell it that way. If you work with essential oils, and the use of essential oils and the uses of herbs are very different often, and so I wouldn't automatically assume that an essential oil could be used the way the herb can be. But if in this particular case, if you're doing it to inhale, you could put a drop or two of rosemary essential oil in a bowl of hot water and use that to inhale to get into the lungs, to open up your lungs. Now, rosemary is contraindicated. That is, contraindicated means do not use in cases where someone's pregnant. And the reason for that is it potentially could cause a miscarriage, and that's something that you really don't want to have happen, obviously, if you want to stay pregnant. So it's really important, and that's an issue with a lot of herbs. Now, if you have just a little bit of rosemary in your food, unless you've got some major issues, it's probably not going to be a problem. But when you're working with herbs medicinally, it's not just little specks of an herb. You're working with a larger quantity, and usually more than one dose. So you want to be really mindful of any issues that you might have in that case. In Europe, rosemary is also known as a liver herb. It's especially helpful in helping the body digest fats. Powdered rosemary is antiseptic, and this is some dried herb. And if I take a mortar and pestle and I grind it up a little bit finer, or put it through a spice grinder, I could place it on minor cuts and scrapes. So it's antiseptic, and it's also styptic. Styptic means it'll stop bleeding. We're not talking major wounds, but we're just talking about like maybe scrapes. It can be very helpful in that sense. So I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit more about rosemary. It's certainly an herb worth getting more familiar with, and it's great just to cook with it. And I recommend it highly. Play around with it, and especially if you can get organic, locally grown, pesticide-free herbs, because that's always important. If you have any questions, please feel free to put any questions or comments below the video. I'd like to thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed today's edition of Keeping Healthy with Kitchen Herbs. And remember, if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you'll get notified of our offerings in the future, and you can find them a lot easier. I'm planning on doing more in this series about keeping healthy with kitchen herbs, and also other types of videos. Be well, and blessed be.